Imagine Britain without the M6, the M1 or the M25. No endless slip roads, no sprawling service stations, no iconic blue signs. It's hard to picture, isn't it? Yet, before 1958, Britain had no motorways at all. And in just a few decades, the country was carved up and reconnected in ways that changed not only how we travelled, but where people lived, worked, and even how they voted. So how did roads, of all things, become one of the most powerful tools for reshaping Britain's geography? The story begins in Lancashire in 1958. With great fanfare, Britain opened its very first stretch of motorway, the Preston bypass. It was only 8 miles long, but it marked the beginning of a revolution. This was the age of the car boom. After the rationing and austerity of the 1940s and early 50s, car ownership in Britain exploded. In 1950, there were about 2 million cars on the road. By the end of the 1960s, that number had shot up to over 11 million. And those cars needed new infrastructure. Railways had once been the arteries of the nation, but by the late 1950s, they were in decline. Roads, especially motorways, were the future. Was this just about transport, or did the government see roads as something far bigger, a way of reshaping Britain's economic and political map? At one level, the answer was obvious. Britain needed faster, safer and more efficient ways of moving goods and people. The existing A roads were clogged, narrow and dangerous. But there was also a deeper agenda. Motorways were a tool of modernisation, physical symbols that Britain could match the efficiency of Germany or the US. West Germany's autobahns and America's interstate highway system were models of national pride, and Britain's leaders wanted to prove the country could keep up. And for planners, motorways weren't just about getting from A to B. They were about creating new patterns of life, where factories were to be built, where housing estates expanded, even where commuters decided to live. Think about it. If a motorway could put Manchester and Birmingham within a couple of hours of each other, didn't that reshape the geography of jobs, shopping and politics? If motorways were designed to bring people together, why did they so often divide the communities they cut through? The motorways of the 1960s and 70s were feats of engineering. Bridges soared over valleys, embankments sliced through hillsides, and new junctions created a whole new language of travel. But for all the promise, there were costs. Villages were bisected. Farmland was compulsorily purchased. Ancient landscapes were permanently scarred. Take the M25. Today it's infamous as the London Orbital Car Park. But when it was built between the 1970s and 1986, it required carving through countryside, estates and long settled communities. Campaigners tried to resist, but the momentum of progress seemed unstoppable. If roads brought speed and efficiency, why did they also bring congestion and sprawl? Motorways didn't just change how we travelled, they changed where wealth flowed. Factories and warehouses, once clustered near canals and rail lines, now relocated to motorway junctions. Think of the M1 corridor, studded with distribution hubs, or the M6 around Birmingham, which became a magnet for industry. Motorways also changed retail. Out-of-town shopping centres like the Metro Centre near Newcastle or Brent Cross in London depended on motorway access. Without motorways, Britain's retail revolution might never have happened. But here's a political edge. Motorways shifted not only money but also people. Suburban sprawl expanded further into the countryside. Commuter belts grew. The car owner became the archetypal swing voter of post-war Britain. So did Britain's motorways help shape not only its economy, but also its politics? By the 1970s, Owning a car wasn't just about transport, it was about identity. Cars symbolised freedoms, aspiration and status. And as car ownership spread, it began to blur traditional class lines. A skilled factory worker in Coventry might own the same Ford Cortina as a small businessman in Essex, but both now depended on good roads to commute, shop and live their daily lives. Politicians noticed. Policies around fuel duty, road tax and motorway expansion became matters of electoral calculation. The motorist became a political force. If cars were democratising freedom, why did they also fuel inequality between those who could afford to drive and those left behind? Not everyone welcomed the motorway age. From the 1960s onwards, campaigns began to challenge the environmental and social costs. Groups like the Campaign for the Protection of Rural England, CPRE, warned about the destruction of the countryside and the dangers of unchecked sprawl. By the 1970s, as Britain grappled with oil crises and environmental awareness grew, resistance hardened. Protests against urban motorway schemes like the Westway in London or the cancelled Ringways plan revealed a shift in public opinion. Roads were no longer automatically symbols of progress. The very motorways that had once embodied modernity were now seen by many as relics of an outdated, car-obsessed vision. So here's a question for you, the viewer. What do you think? Were Britain's motorways symbols of freedom or scars across the land? Drop your thoughts into the comments. But back then, as protests rose, the government faced a dilemma. Could they really stop building when the car economy was so deeply entrenched? By the 1980s, the great age of motorway expansion was drawing to a close. Most of the major arteries were complete. The M25 opened in 1986 with a huge media fanfare. Margaret Thatcher herself called it the road to prosperity. Yet within days, it was already congested. The dream of endless freedom on the open road had met the reality of Britain's crowded geography. And that really shaped Britain's cities too. Suburbs spread further out, while inner cities, cut through by elevated roads and ringways, often suffered decline. So what kind of country had motorways actually built? Today, motorways are so familiar that it's hard to imagine Britain without them. They underpin everything from online shopping to family holidays, from political campaigning to the daily commute. But their legacy is double-edged. They brought speed, efficiency and modernity, but also congestion, pollution and sprawl. They stitched Britain together, but also carved it apart. In short, they reshaped Britain's geography as profoundly as canals, railways, or even acts of union. When you next drive the M6 or crawl around the M25, remember, these roads aren't just tarmac. They're the physical imprint of an era when Britain believed in cars, in progress, and in modernisation at any cost. Motorways remapped the nation, but they also remind us of the price of change. And just as with canals or railways, they force us to ask, how will the next great transport revolution reshape Britain? Thank you for walking a little further down the road that made Britain with me. The story winds on. Try this one. I think you'll like it. Until then, thanks so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you very soon.